Are you serious right now? Vincent Wade muttered under his breath, staring at the sleek black Aston Martin parked in front of him with the keys locked inside. A gust of wind blew his perfectly tailored coat open, and he cursed himself again for not grabbing his phone from the driver's seat before slamming the door shut. He wasn't used to mistakes like this. Vincent was the guy who had assistants, security detail, and backup plans for his backup plans. But today, of all days, he told his driver to take the rest of the afternoon off. He wanted space. Silence. He didn't expect to be standing on a random sidewalk in downtown Chicago, patting the pockets of his $1,000 coat like a lost tourist. Need help? A voice called from behind. He turned. She was standing by a coffee cart holding a paper cup and a pastry bag. Her coat was too thin for this late November chill, and her hair was tucked under a knitted beanie that had clearly seen better days. But her eyes, bright, curious, and a little amused, were impossible to ignore. I locked myself out, Vincent admitted with a dry laugh, gesturing to the car. She tilted her head. Is it your car? Or are you just admiring someone else's bad luck? He let out a quiet laugh. Mine. Unfortunately. She walked closer, eyeing him. You don't have a phone? Inside the car. Along with my pride. She grinned and handed her phone over without hesitation. Here. You can use mine. He blinked. You're just going to hand it to a stranger? You don't look like the type to run off with it, she said, clearly teasing. Besides, if you do, I'll just report you to the cops in the fancy suit driving the stolen Aston. Vincent took the phone, smiling despite himself. Her energy was disarming. Thanks. I'll only be a second. He dialed his assistant's number from memory, leaving a quick voicemail to send someone with a spare key. When he handed the phone back, she was still standing there, sipping from her cup like she had nowhere to be. I'm Vincent, he said, pocketing his hands. Olive, she replied, sliding the phone into her coat. Olive Foster. You saved me. Well, you looked like you were one gust of wind away from swearing at a car, so I figured I'd intervene. He laughed, shaking his head. I deserved that. Probably. They stood there for a beat, the city buzzing around them. He looked at her again, really looked this time. The faint pink in her cheeks from the cold, the laugh still playing at the corners of her mouth. She didn't seem impressed by his wealth or his car or the fact that he was wearing a coat that cost more than most rent checks. She didn't know who he was, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't want to correct that. Can I buy you a coffee? As a thank you. She lifted her cup. Bit late for that. Dinner then. She raised a brow. That escalated quickly. I'm not great at small talk, he admitted. But I owe you. And I'd like to get to know you. She studied him for a second. What if I say no? Then I'll stand here locked out of my car until you change your mind. She smiled. Persistent. I like that. He didn't expect her to nod. But she did. All right. One dinner. But if you're secretly some weird car thief who wears designer to get pity from strangers, I'm out. Fair, he said with a grin. Can I pick you up tonight? I'm off work at 6. I waitress at a place called Benny's 2 blocks that way, she said, pointing. You can meet me there. Vincent nodded. It's a date. As she walked away, he watched her until she turned the corner. Her pace was confident, carefree. The kind of woman who didn't chase anything but somehow made you want to follow her. He didn't even notice the car service pulling up with his spare key until the driver cleared his throat. That night, he pulled up to Benny's in a sleek black Mercedes. Not the Aston he figured showing up in the same car he got locked out of might be a bad look. She stepped out of the restaurant a few minutes after 6, tying a hoodie around her waist, her hair now loose under the streetlights. She spotted the car, then him, and walked over. No tux? I'm shocked. I dressed down for diners, he said, opening the passenger door for her. She slid in. Where are we going? You'll see. He took her to a rooftop restaurant with a view of the skyline so stunning she actually gasped when they stepped out of the elevator. This isn't dinner. This is something people do on anniversaries after 10 years of marriage. I like to set the bar high. She gave him a look. You're not trying to impress me with money, right? No, he said honestly. I'm trying to impress you with effort. That shut her up just for a second. Dinner was a blur of laughter, stories, and stolen glances. She told him about her art degree she didn't use, how she worked double shifts to help her younger brother through school, how she hated people who talked with food in their mouth but loved people who made her laugh. He told her bits and pieces carefully edited about being in real estate, about growing up in Maine, about how he hadn't had a night like this in longer than he cared to admit. "Why real estate?" she asked, sipping her wine. He shrugged. "I like building things. Owning things. Controlling the outcome." She tilted her head. "You don't strike me as the controlling type." Her words hit somewhere unexpected and he found himself leaning closer. "I wasn't always a millionaire, Olive." She smiled, slow and warm. "I like that you said wasn't. Most guys pretend like they were always rolling in cash. I wasn't. And I don't want to pretend." Something shifted then. She looked at him differently, like she saw past the suit, the view, the private rooftop table. Like she saw him. The night ended with him walking her back to her apartment. She lived in a walk-up above a bookstore. He held the door open. "Thank you," she said softly. "For dinner. For not being who I thought you'd be." He stepped closer. "And who did you think I'd be? Arrogant. Boring. Probably on your phone half the night." He smiled. "And instead," she looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper, "someone I want to see again." He wanted to kiss her. But he didn't. Instead, he reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "Then I'll see you tomorrow." She nodded. And when she closed the door behind her, Vincent stood there on the steps for a full minute, staring at the cracked paint and peeling wood. He'd gotten locked out of his car. And somehow, in the middle of a freezing Chicago afternoon, he'd met the one person who made him want to stay exactly where he was. The next evening, Vincent stood outside the art gallery 3 blocks from Olive's apartment, staring up at the brick facade like it held the answer to a question he hadn't yet asked. He wasn't sure what compelled him to suggest it. Maybe it was the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about color and movement, how she'd once painted a mural on the side of a rec center in a neighborhood she hadn't lived in. Maybe it was the subtle way she glanced at the framed pieces hanging in the restaurant the night before, her fingers twitching slightly like they were remembering the brushstrokes. Either way, when he'd asked if she wanted to go, she'd hesitated only long enough to make him wonder if she would say no. But she didn't. When she arrived, bundled in a worn gray scarf and boots dusted with sidewalk salt, she didn't look at the gallery right away. She looked at him. "You're early," she said. "You're exactly on time," he replied. "I wasn't sure you'd remember." "I haven't forgotten a thing." That made her quiet just for a second. They stepped inside together, the warmth of the gallery washing over them as the door shut behind. The space was intimate, lit by low-hung pendant lights and framed by deep navy walls. A string quartet played softly from a raised platform in the corner. Vincent watched Olive take it in, her gaze sweeping from canvas to canvas like she was drinking in each detail. "Do you paint anymore?" he asked. She folded her arms lightly. "Not really. Not since I moved out of my last place. I don't have the room. Or the time. What would you paint if you could?" She turned to him. "That's a loaded question." "I don't mind." She studied the piece in front of them. It was abstract, frenzied, layered, chaotic in a way that felt oddly intentional. "I'd paint something with movement," she said softly. "Not just lines and color. Something that looks like it's trying to break out of the canvas. Something alive." He stepped closer. "Why?" "Because I feel stuck," she answered before she could stop herself. Then she laughed, short and a little embarrassed. "Sorry. That was heavier than I meant it to be." "Don't apologize." I asked. She looked at him again, this time without the usual brightness. "You ever get that feeling? Like you built a life that looks fine from the outside, but inside it's just quiet?" He nodded slowly. "More often than I like to admit." They stood there, not speaking, surrounded by silence that had nothing to do with the music or the art. It was the kind of silence that made everything feel closer. "Why did you really ask me out that first night?" she asked suddenly. He didn't hesitate. "Because you didn't ask me who I was." She raised a brow. "Should I have?" "Most people do. Or they assume." "You didn't care." "I didn't know." "And you still don't," he said, voice low. "But I like that. I like being just a guy without a title." She tilted her head, searching his face. "Are you famous or something?" "No, infamous." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Not yet. They kept walking. The next exhibit was a series of black and white portraits, raw and unfiltered. Olive stopped in front of one of a woman on a fire escape, cigarette dangling from her fingers, her eyes closed like she was somewhere far away. She looks like she just let go of something, Olive whispered. Vincent looked at her, then at the photograph. Or like she doesn't know if she should. Olive's voice dropped. Have you ever let go of something you shouldn't have? He didn't answer right away. His jaw tensed slightly before he said yes. They lingered there, neither willing to break the moment. Finally, she stepped back, shaking off whatever had settled between them. I need a drink, she said. You? Absolutely. They crossed the street to a quiet bar with low lighting and worn leather booths. Vincent ordered a whiskey. Olive got a glass of red wine, her fingers tapping a rhythm against the stem. You're not what I expected, she said after their drinks arrived. What did you expect? Someone polished. Predictable. Maybe a little too perfect. I can be all those things, he said. But not with you. She narrowed her eyes. Why not? Because you ask real questions. And because you'd call me out if I gave fake answers. She gave a small laugh. I would. He leaned back, watching her. You're different. Different how? You don't try to impress anyone. You just are. And you don't realize that's more impressive than anything else. Her fingers stopped tapping. I don't know what to do with a compliment like that, she admitted. Keep it. I meant it. She set down her glass. Okay, your turn. Tell me something you've never told anyone. He stared at the table for a moment. Then he looked up at her. I hate sleeping alone. Her brows lifted. I've had 5 apartments in the last 10 years, he continued. All of them bigger than the last. And yet, every night, I end up in the same corner of the bed. Like I'm still making space for someone who never showed up. Olive didn't speak. She reached across the table and placed her hand over his. He didn't pull away. Later, when he walked her home, there wasn't any talk of tomorrow or promises made. But at her door, she turned and kissed him. Not out of impulse or uncertainty, but with purpose. Like she decided something in that moment. When she pulled back, her voice was soft but steady. You're not just a guy with a nice car and good taste in restaurants. He looked at her, barely breathing. You're a man who's been lonely for a long time, she said. And I think, maybe I have too. Then she opened her door and disappeared inside, leaving Vincent standing there with the kind of ache he hadn't felt in years. An ache he didn't want to shake. Vincent stood in front of a canvas, brush poised in his hand, the soft scent of linseed oil and turpentine ghosting through the room. The warehouse loft he'd owned for years, originally a cold investment property, had, for the first time, been converted into something personal. The entire top floor was now a studio. For her. Olive's easel sat by the floor-to-ceiling windows, her paints arranged with chaotic precision. Her coat was draped over a stool, scarf tossed beside it, and a half-drunk cup of coffee sat next to a palette smeared in burnt sienna and cobalt blue. She hadn't even noticed him standing there yet, too focused on the canvas in front of her. He watched her, not just because she was beautiful in the light of the setting sun, but because he still couldn't believe she'd said yes. After weeks of tentative dinners, long walks home in the quiet dark, and conversations that slipped between laughter and vulnerability, she'd finally let him in. Literally. You're staring, she said without turning. I'm allowed, he answered. It's my loft. You gave it to me for painting. Not for watching me work like I'm part of the exhibit. I never agreed to those terms. She pulled her brush back, glancing over her shoulder. You're a terrible patron. I'm the best kind. I didn't even ask you to finish the piece. You didn't have to. She turned to face him fully now, a streak of blue across her forearm. You gave me space I haven't had in years. You think I'm not going to fill it with something that matters. He crossed the room, stopping just short of touching her. What are you painting? She looked at the canvas again. Something I didn't know I needed to see. Vincent studied the half-formed lines, the suggestion of movement in the brushstrokes. It wasn't abstract, not quite. A figure was emerging, shoulders hunched, a hand pressed to glass, city lights blurred in the background. Is that me? He asked. I don't know yet, she admitted. Maybe it's someone I used to be. Maybe it's someone neither of us has met. He reached out and gently wiped the streak of paint from her arm with his thumb. You've changed since the first night I met you. She arched a brow. You locked yourself out of a car and I lent you a phone. Not exactly the stuff of Greek tragedy. No, but I think about it more than I should. He leaned in, his voice low. I think about how that one moment cracked something open. How everything since has felt different. Olive's expression shifted, suddenly unreadable. She stepped back, wiping her hands with a rag. Don't make it sound like fate. Why not? Because fate sounds like something you don't have any control over. And we've both been choosing this every day. That's not fate. That's risk. Her words hit somewhere between his ribs, sharp and right. He nodded once. You're right. This is a risk. She turned away again, focusing on the canvas. You always have control. Even when you pretend you don't. I've never pretended with you. She hesitated. You haven't told me what you actually do. Not really. Vincent exhaled slowly. I own property, developments, luxury high-rises, commercial towers, private equity in real estate syndicates. She looked over her shoulder. So you're rich. I'm successful. The money came after. Why haven't you said that before? Because I didn't want it to define me. She set her rag down. It doesn't. But I need to know what kind of world I'm walking into. He walked to the window, looking out over the city. A world where people either want things from me or want to be seen with me. A world where trust is currency, and most of it is counterfeit. She was quiet for a long time. Then, that sounds exhausting. It is. He turned to her. But when I'm with you, it doesn't feel like that anymore. Olive's arms dropped to her sides, and for the first time, she looked unguarded. I grew up thinking money would solve everything. That if I just had enough, I could stop worrying. But I've seen what it does to people. How it changes them. Let me show you that it doesn't have to change us. Her gaze didn't waver. I don't want to be someone you hide from the world. You never were. But you're still hiding the world from me. His jaw tightened. There's a charity gala in 2 nights. My company's sponsoring it. It's black tie. Press will be there. Cameras. People who think they know me. She studied him. And you want me to go with you? I want them to see you. Olive stepped closer. Not as a prop. Not as the girl you're dating for fun. No, he said, voice firm. As the woman I'm falling in love with. Her breath caught, and for a second, she didn't speak. Then you're serious? I haven't been more in my life. She folded her arms, not out of defensiveness, but to hold something in. I don't have a dress for a gala. I already took care of that. Her eyes narrowed. You bought me a dress? I bought you 10. You can choose. She stared at him. You're ridiculous. I'm trying. She walked to him, slow and deliberate, until they were face to face. Then I'll come. But only if you promise not to let anyone talk to me like I'm furniture. I'll destroy anyone who tries. She smiled soft, real, and full of something that hadn't been there before. You really are falling, aren't you? He touched her cheek, careful and reverent. I already fell. And when she leaned into him, letting the silence stretch between heartbeats, he knew that this whatever it was no longer a risk. It was a promise. The gala unfurled like a dream draped in glass and gold. Olive stood at the top of the grand staircase inside the Langley Museum, her hand resting lightly on the velvet-lined banister, her breath caught somewhere between her lungs and her heart. The dress she'd chosen, a rich midnight blue that dipped low at the back and shimmered faintly under the chandelier light, fit her like it had been made for her alone. Vincent had insisted she choose whichever gown made her feel most like herself. This one didn't make her feel like someone else. It made her feel seen. Vincent was already at the base of the staircase, talking to a man in a navy tuxedo and silver cufflinks. When he caught sight of her, he stopped mid-sentence. His hand fell to his side and his gaze fixed on her like he'd just found something he'd been looking for without knowing he'd lost it. She descended slowly, the music swelling beneath the hush of clinking glasses and murmured conversation. When she reached the last step, Vincent took her hand without a word and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "You look like a storm I'd walk into willingly," he said. Olive arched a brow. "Does that line usually work? I've never used it before." "Good," she said, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. "Let's hope it's the last one you'll ever need." They moved through the crowd together, and for the first time, Olive saw Vincent in his world. Not just in the clothes or the car or the views from high-rise windows, but among people who watched him like a commodity, who measured their words when they spoke to him. Every handshake came with a calculation. Every smile was barbed. Her fingers tightened around his. He noticed. "You all right?" "I'm fine," she said. "Just trying to figure out which of these people actually know your middle name." Vincent leaned in slightly. "Only my mother. And now you." A woman in a sequined gown approached, her gaze flicking briefly to Olive before settling on Vincent. "Vincent, I didn't think you'd bring anyone." "I didn't plan to," he said evenly. But Olive changed that. The woman's smile thinned. "Of course." As she walked away, Olive looked up at him. "Do you deal with that a lot?" "Ignore them," he said. "They only notice when they feel threatened." "Then I must be doing something right." He led her to the balcony where the noise faded into distant echoes. The air was cooler out there, the city glittering beneath them like a sky turned upside down. "I've been thinking," Olive said, her hand tracing the balustrade. "About your world. About where I fit in it." He turned to face her fully. "Anywhere you want." "That's not how it works. I'm not asking you to become someone else." "No," she said quietly, "but I can't pretend this isn't intimidating. I paint on canvases I buy second-hand. I eat leftovers standing over the sink. I live above a bookstore that leaks every time it rains. I don't care about any of that." "I know," she whispered. "But I do. Because I don't want to be the girl who shows up on your arm and doesn't know what fork to use. I want to be someone who belongs next to you, not someone you have to explain." He stepped closer. "Then let me tell you something I've never told anyone." She looked up. "I used to live in my car." Her breath caught. 2 years. After my father died, everything collapsed. I dropped out of school, couch surfed until I wore out every welcome, then ended up in a rusted-out Honda in a parking lot behind a gym. I showered using paper towels in the sink. Ate from vending machines. And every night I promised myself that if I got out, I'd never go back. Olive's eyes filled, but she didn't speak. "I built everything from the ground up," he continued. "But I didn't do it to be admired. I did it because I needed to survive. And now, for the first time in years, I want to build something for someone else." She reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. "You don't need to become someone else to stand next to me," he said. "You're already everything." Olive closed the distance and kissed him, not like the first time, not tentative, not cautious. This was full and grounding and certain. A kiss that said, "I see you." A kiss that said, "Stay." Inside, the music shifted. Vincent glanced toward the ballroom. "Dance with me." "I don't really," he raised a brow. "Olive?" She sighed. "Fine. But if I step on your foot, I'm not apologizing." He led her back inside, and the moment they stepped onto the floor, the rest of the room seemed to blur. They danced slowly, her hand in his other resting gently at the small of her back. His touch was steady, guiding, but not controlling. He moved like someone used to leading without needing to dominate. "I've never been to anything this formal in my life," she admitted. "Then you're making your debut in style." She smiled. "I think I could get used to this." "Not the galas," he said. "Not the tuxedos. Just us. This." Her smile softened. "Yeah. Me too." The music faded and applause rippled through the crowd. Vincent leaned toward her ear. "Come with me." She didn't ask where. He led her through the back corridor of the museum, past a velvet rope and up a narrow staircase that opened into a private observatory. The ceiling was domed glass and the stars spilled in like confetti. "This is where I come to disappear," he said. Olive turned slowly. "It's beautiful. I've never brought anyone here before." She walked to the center of the room, looking up. "Why tonight?" "Because this is the place I come when I need to remember who I am. And I wanted you to see it." Because you're the only one who makes me feel like myself without trying. She looked back at him, her voice barely above a breath. You said you built everything from the ground up. I did. Then maybe it's time to stop building alone. He crossed to her, something shifting in his expression. Are you saying? I'm saying yes, she said. To whatever this is. To whatever comes next. He didn't answer with words. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, not because he'd planned it, but because he'd been carrying it for days, waiting for the moment to feel right. He opened it. Inside was a simple ring. Elegant. Understated. Timeless. Olive's breath hitched. I'm not asking for forever yet, he said. I just want to know if you'll let me keep building this with you. She took the box from him, closed it gently, and then looked up. You already know the answer. They didn't kiss under starlight because it was perfect. They kissed because it was real. Because every wall had come down. Because the man who once lived in his car had found a woman who lived in truth, and together they built something not out of wealth or image but out of the kind of love that doesn't ask to be earned. It just is. And it was everything. Vincent's townhouse was quiet, but not with loneliness. It was the kind of quiet that felt full, like the pause between notes in a melody. Olive stood barefoot in the kitchen, unwrapping a bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked up from a stall near the river. She arranged them in a glass jar, not a vase, because it reminded her of home. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon and fresh bread. She'd baked that morning just because she could. Vincent leaned on the counter behind her, still in his shirt from the office, sleeves rolled to his elbows. You're nesting. She glanced over her shoulder. Maybe I am. He stepped closer, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. I like it. You don't think it's too soon? I think I want to find those flowers in that jar every morning. She turned in his arms, eyeing him. You're getting soft. I've always been soft for you. I just hit it better before. Olive laughed, brushing her fingers lightly along the edge of his jaw. You've changed. I think I finally stopped pretending I didn't want this. They stayed like that for a while, in the kind of silence that felt earned. Outside, the sun had dipped low, casting gold through the tall windows. For the first time since they began, there were no more questions hanging between them. Later that week, Olive stood in front of a whitewashed brick wall on the south side, paintbrush in hand, city traffic rumbling in the distance. The mural commission had come unexpectedly through a contact of Vincent's who ran a community arts initiative. She'd almost said no. Then she saw the wall. Blank, wide, waiting. Vincent watched from a distance, leaning against the hood of his car, arms crossed. She wore overalls splattered with color, her hair piled on top of her head, her entire body moving with each stroke like she was dancing with the wall. She didn't need his help here. She was entirely herself, and that, more than anything, made him stay. When she took a break, she crossed the street to him, sipping water from a reusable bottle. I forgot how good this feels, she said, to make something that stays. You're putting your name on it? She hesitated. I think I will, for once. He nodded. Good. She leaned against the car beside him. You still going to those meetings with the architects? Only because you banned me from hovering. You were a nightmare the last time I came to your office. You kept looking at the mock-ups like they personally offended you. They did. The angles were wrong. She nudged him with her shoulder. Control freak. You're not wrong. She looked up at him. You ever think about leaving it behind? The business. Everything. Starting fresh somewhere. Just you and me. He was quiet for a moment. Then, yes. But not because I want to run. Because I want to build something we own. Completely. Together. Olive studied him. You're serious. I bought land. Upstate. Near the lake. Wooded. Quiet. It's not much yet, but I want it to be ours. She stepped in front of him, hands on his chest. Like a home. Like a beginning. I'd want a studio. You'll have it. And a garden. Done. And a dog. He grinned. I already put a deposit on one. She blinked. You did what? Golden retriever. 8 weeks old. I pick her up next Friday. Olive laughed. Full and sudden. You're insane. I'm in love. She kissed him, fast and warm, then pulled back. You really are building a whole life around this, aren't you? I'm building it with you. The following month, the mural unveiled to a small crowd gathered on folding chairs beneath the warm spring sun. Olive stood next to Vincent, her name signed in the lower corner of the wall in black paint. The piece was bold and bright, figures in motion, hands reaching, color climbing. It was about becoming, about what it meant to step into the light. Afterward, they drove north. The land was quiet. The trees still bare from winter, the lake glinting through the gaps in the pines. A foundation had been poured and framing was underway. Olive stepped out of the car and stared at the bones of what would be their home. I don't know if I deserve this, she said softly. Vincent came up behind her. You deserve everything. I spent so long just surviving. Then let's live. Weeks passed. The house took shape. The dog Maple chewed everything. Olive painted every day, her studio tucked beneath the sloped roof, sunlight pouring in through wide windows. Vincent worked from a small office that overlooked the lake, his days no longer driven by meetings and mergers, but by the rhythm of something slower, more honest. One afternoon, she found him on the porch, a stack of sketches in his lap. You're drawing? She asked, surprised. I used to, a long time ago. Thought I'd try again. She picked up one, a rough sketch of her, sitting in the grass with Maple curled at her feet. I look peaceful. You are. She sat beside him, tucking her feet beneath her. You think this will last? I think we'll fight, and mess up. And probably burn dinner more than once. She smiled. But I also think I'll wake up every morning choosing you. And that's enough. She rested her head on his shoulder. I want to marry you. Vincent turned his head. Are you proposing? Don't make it weird. It's not weird. It's perfect. They married quietly in the fall. In the backyard, beneath trees that had turned gold and crimson. No press. No spectacle. Just them, a few close friends, and a dog that barked halfway through the vows. Vincent wore a navy suit. Olive wore a dress she'd sewn herself, the hem embroidered with vines and wildflowers. They wrote their own vows, simple and honest. When he said, "You're the life I never thought I'd have," she cried. When she said, "You're the home I didn't know I was building," he did too. Afterward, they danced barefoot under strings of lights. And when the last guest left and the night grew quiet again, they stood together in the dark, hands linked. This is just the beginning, Olive whispered. Vincent kissed her knuckles. No. This is exactly where we're meant to be. And they stayed there, in the soft hush of the woods, with the stars above and the warmth of a shared life ahead, knowing finally, fully that love wasn't a risk. It was the reward.